That's right. It's time for everyone's favorite Twitch politics show, The More Perfect Union. Covering the best in U.S. politics and Twitch political drama, we aim to disarm the left using the Constitution as our spear and shield.
The entire articulation for the use of deadly force is the imminent threat of death or great bodily harm. It has nothing to do with whether or not...
What was the threat?
As a matter of fact...
What was the threat?
Are you out of your mind, Gappy? You're out of your mind. Get ready.
The other thing is that the cost of enamel paints and Warhammer figures has gone through the roof. When you poll foreign citizens of other countries about our president, they don't vote, and they are not representing the voice of their governments. It is true that a lot of foreign governments are glad that Joe Biden is president because they steamroll his shit left and right every way, 7 ways from Sunday. Matter of fact, twice on Sunday. I care what the American people think. Yeah, it's a little unmute action there. Wow, fantastic. So last night in lovely Southern California, I've been here all week doing some corporate broadcast shows. And tomorrow I'm headed back to the land of the frozen sky. And I'll be there for a few days. And then I come back, this time to Northern California. It's like somebody's trying to send me a message. But I managed to vote. Donald Trump won. Also managed that a few people that I supported on the various school boards in St. Croix and Pierce County, River Falls School District, chiefly among them, saw some of my candidate choices become very successful. A couple other candidates fell short. Matt Bachlan, who was running for Troy Township Supervisor position number 4, did not win, and I believe he expressed some reticence about jumping into future races. But he gave it a good effort, withstood a lot of garbage attacks, and he's still a genuinely good person who cares about his community, cares about the Constitution of the United States, and he is deeply committed to the promise that the founders gave us. And so for all of the candidates who were running, who did not win, I commend you all. It takes a lot of effort and nerve to get out there and do that work. And campaigning is not easy. And I've covered a little bit of it. It's not easy trying to film it, trying to edit things in a very time-sensitive way, in an impactful way. I hope that the material that I did, not necessarily on some of it on behalf of the candidates, but some of it just trying to be newsworthy. Hopefully that was interesting and informative and helped people make some decision-making. And to the extent that it helped candidates secure a win by allowing them to get their message out in vehicles that work for them, fantastic. And to the extent that it didn't, it's a life and learning lesson for all of us to be able to do some stuff. So we are first time broadcasting live from a remote location in beautiful Southern California. Of course, as you can tell, there's just a little bit of rain coming in the forecast. I fly back tomorrow. There's a 40% chance of rain in beautiful Southern California. And I think it's going to rain for just a couple of days. Good news is that when I get back to Minneapolis tomorrow night around midnight, it won't be quite so bad. So I will continue previously scheduled evolution until the 11th, and I'll be coming back out to the Bay Area this time, doing additional corporate shows. So lots of busyness, lots of work and activity for yours truly. And I wanted to take the opportunity to finally get a couple of things done, get the notion of being able to catch people on platforms that they like. As a friend of mine said, you have to meet people where they are. And in this particular day and age, with so many different social media choices, it's important to understand that whether you're on Kick, Twitch, Rumble, YouTube, I wanted to say that that's pretty much, that covers me. So I'm currently using Restream.io. Have a five stream subscription, so I'm streaming to 5 simultaneous platforms, and I'm able, except for Rumble, I have to do Rumble as a separate feed for chat, but I can uniformly respond to all chats, and of course there's a sync. They're working on some different things. I could see all of your chats, so if you happen to jump into chat and you drop a message, that's fine. If you want to get in on the conversation, you want to talk physically, let me know. I've got Twitter. Sorry, not Twitter. I've got that. But I've got X. Duh. You think I've had a hard week? I've got Discord. Yes, that's right, Discord. And Zoom. So I have a Zoom account. And happy to bring people in. Anybody want to come in? Just let me know. Drop me a hotspot in chat, and we'll talk about it. One of the things I did want to kind of bring up is I use my Twitter account, even though I am a lovable guy, as you could tell. I have a great face for radio, a great voice for radio, and I use the platform mostly to respond to other people. And some of the people I have been responding to, they're different if you talk to them in a space versus, just responding to the text messages and stuff that go for. That includes a guy named like Mario Narwhal, Suleiman, and I don't want to bastardize their people's names, but these people know who they are. And if you follow me, you probably know of them. And they tend to be very left-leaning. They try to present themselves under the guise of like news media informative, but in reality, they have some pretty significant left-leaning biases. Now, I will say this. It's not a problem that people have a left-leaning or a right-leaning bias. So long as you can defend the positions that you defend. And I will give Mario particularly credit for having a relatively speaking, most of the time, a relatively balanced take when he does his Twitter spaces. So tonight I had an opportunity to talk to his Twitter space, and I was actually impressed. There was a number of women. And I'm not saying this because I'm impressed because women made a good argument. I'm saying I was impressed by the political, ideological diversity that was in that space tonight. And I think Mario deserves a bunch of credit. Khaleesi, who I have gone after nearly mercilessly, and Suleiman and Mario about their stance, particularly with respect to the quote-unquote the genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza, and how crazy I think their takes are on that. The topic tonight was adjacent to that, but not specific. The generalized topic was hate speech, and apparently a law that was passed by is up for debate in Scotland, or has passed in Scotland, that essentially criminalizes anything that makes people feel they've been insulted. It might be a slight hyperbolic exaggeration of what the truth is, but a lot of people were talking, and there's this one guy named Preston who is a practicing lawyer. He's been over there doing this type of law, First Amendment not free speech, but But speech protection, hate speech law. Been a practicing attorney for 15 years in the United States and England, Scotland, and incredibly intelligent person. I don't know his politics, but his politics were basically siding against these so-called hate speech, these hate speech deals. And I kind of got into the conversation, and finally, and I've spoken on one of Mario's panels in the distant past, and I spoke on this one. I was afforded an opportunity to speak on this one. And my take for what the problem is, and I'm not trying to argue what Scotland should or shouldn't do, just within the context of the dangers in which it is crafted, the law was crafted, make it possible that somebody, and it's not defined who, but it's the question of would a reasonable person have felt that speech was hateful? Well, the problem with that is that for probably 15 or so years, we have been looking at a sliding scale of what creates insult. And, and you can literally be insulted. And I think somebody used the phrase like your horse is gay. Or as we've seen recently in the news, a woman praying silently to herself, no outward visible references of religion or whatever, just standing there. She's thoughts bouncing around inside her head. But she's asked by an officer, is she praying? And and she said, I'm praying I'm praying silently to myself. I'm not obstructing anybody's egress or exit from this place. I'm just praying to my God in my own way, silently. And they arrested her. In America, we would rail at that. But of course, we had our own similar situation where a preacher and members of his family were arrested for just simply preaching outside of an abortion clinic in a public area, public easement. And because somebody had defined that conduct as hate speech, this pastor was arrested, tried, and I'm not 100% sure if he was convicted or not as of yet. But we think to ourselves in America that this is something that would never happen here. But lo and behold, it has happened. Now, the big difference between what happened in the United States and what happened in Scotland is that in Scotland there is no First Amendment. There is no limiting, supervening authority or power to restrict what the government can do to you. In America, the First Amendment protects us when we speak out against conduct that we feel is wrong, particularly when that conduct or that speech is aimed at the government. Now, when the government comes back at us and they seek to engage with social media companies to deplatform or deregister or ban accounts, as they did in 2016, or as they sought to combat so-called misinformation. Misinformation in this case is anything other than what the government says. So even though the government itself didn't censor the speech, the government denigrated those who did speak against the government policy and actively engaged, including paid for, various entities in the social media space, including the former Twitter Facebook, Google, and others to demonetize accounts promoting this quote-unquote misinformation. Louis Brandeis was the justice of the Supreme Court. He was not a conservative justice. He was very liberal. And Brandeis, when confronted with the question about limits on free speech, his take was quite simple. It was stunning. It was the answer to speech is more speech. Yet we live in a society today where the government or particular interests, because of their personal biases, their personal offense, can cause the government to act in a way that is antithetical to the very underpinnings which guarantee our freedom as American citizens. Now, the truth of the matter is that this conversation primarily focused on this bill in Scotland and the challenges that either trying to figure out how you would craft the reasonableness standard. And my comment was in there, and it was very well received by people that I think would not necessarily agree with me. Like I said, the panel was fairly well balanced. I was particularly impressed, and I kind of led with this. I was very impressed with a number of the women on the panel, including one Democrat, registered Democrat lawyer, who, when the question came up about the trans movement, quote unquote, she said she didn't believe there was a movement per se, that there wasn't a group per se. And it was the first time I had heard somebody who said that they were vociferously liberal. My words, not hers. But that she had absolutely no problem calling a man and a woman, and that the whole notion of the trans ideology doesn't do anything for society to have to enable it. And I was going to make a comment on that because my thought process is that for those who claim to be gender dysphoric, trans-identified, it doesn't mean that just because they have so identified, that society should put them in a box off into a corner like a broken toy, never to be played with again. I don't think that that is in the best interest of what we are as a human species. But having said that, I think the challenge for civil society is how to recognize that we are first and foremost human beings, and that as human beings and as citizens, we are all protected under the Constitution. We don't need a trans person's Bill of Rights. We don't need, personally, my personal opinion is we don't need a Violence Against Women Act. And this is one of the conversational points that took place earlier this evening on X, when the construct of saying, why do you need to have a specially defined law, an explicit law, to say if you hate somebody because they're gay and you injure them, or you say something that somebody might call anti-Semitic, that's hate speech worthy of a charge, a trial, and a conviction, including potential prison. And I fall back to the argument that the conversation it should not be that Bob said something about Mrs. Rabinowitz in a way that was denigrating of her religion. There is a difference between saying something about Mrs. Rabinowitz's religion and setting her house on fire because she's Jewish. The pattern of action would indicate that there is an arson, potential attempted murder, any number of felony crimes. And the notion of acting in a way that was against somebody's religion or their race or a recognized, protected, constitutionally protected status is an issue for mitigation and aggravation. Meaning, I burned down the house, but I burned down the house for money, is arson. I burned down the house because I didn't like the Jewish lady living in it. That's arson, which may also include other crimes. And because it was done because she was, quote unquote, she was a Jewish person, then at sentencing, the judge and the jury, if the jury is levying the penalty, as is the case in some states, the judge or the jury can consider that, and they can tack on years or tack on penalties as part of the criminal conviction process. It is no different a murder if you kill somebody for their wallet or if you kill them because they're black, or they're white, or they're a woman, or they're a child. The nature of the crime goes to aggravation and mitigation. Did the accused kill the person? That's the salient point. The relative heinousness of the act is a question for the penalty phase. The problem with trying to make these constant determinations about hate speech or hate crimes is that they create new classes of crime. And the difficulty for me in accepting that is we have a difficult enough time enforcing the criminal statutes that we have already. Look at our southern border. Our southern border is just atrocious. We have a state supported by 25 or so other states that is defying the federal government's sovereign ability to control immigration. And of course, people on the left will say, well, this is a problem. Immigration is a federal thing. And we heard this in Wisconsin when people talked about refugee resettlement. It's a federal law. You can't do anything about it. The federal government has the power under immigration, under the Constitution, to determine who can come in the country. The president does not have the sole authority to circumvent law. The 12th Amendment says the president must faithfully execute the laws of the nation. There are clear, well-defined laws on the books controlling immigration. Everybody who comes into this country illegally must be detained. But because the current administration and others in the past have decided that it's, for whatever reason, it's better to not enforce immigration than to enforce the law. And these same politicians will talk about Donald Trump, quote unquote, not above the law. But when you faithfully uphold the laws of the United States per the constitutional oath that you took, is that not acting above the law? Is it not acting above the law when the president says, I'm going to forgive, I'm going to spend money not appropriated to forgive student loan debt? And when told by the Supreme Court of the United States that you can't do that, you don't have the authority, the president turns around within 24 hours and comes up with another scheme to be able to do the same thing. Now, the practical impact is that the money, once forgiven, is never going to go back. The Supreme Court doesn't have the authority to tell the Biden administration, you need to go back and claw that money back that you gave away illegally. But yet it's another example of choice to willingly not enforce the law of the United States. Where we are as a nation is largely the result of a very careful and concerted, focused, dedicated effort over more than 100 years to erode the basic tenets of self-reliance and self-sufficiency away from the American people by liberal forces who related well to Karl Marx. And when liberal academics got together in their ivory towers in Frankfurt and other centers in Europe, and then in the US, in Chicago, and they created the kind of foment, the kind of upheaval and uprising, these are all direct activities that come out of the Communist Manifesto. When you look at how when you look at how certain organizations operate, how they target, isolate, exclude, saturate, carpet bomb the airwaves with negative attacks, the vast majority of which are completely false. People say that Donald Trump is a racist, yet nobody can point to an explicit racist thing that he's ever done. They say that he's heartless. But there are countless people who have come out publicly and said what a generous person he is. They'll say he's going to go off half-cocked and he's going to start World War III. Yet not only did he not start World War III, he got Europe to bolster its contributions to shared defense, something that they had not been doing efficiently or effectively for more than 30 years. Yet $400 additional billion of commitments came in, and as a result, NATO is stronger today than it was in 2016. Folks, our notion of free speech, the right to seek redress of grievances with our government, It is a crucial right. It is a sacred duty and responsibility for each of us to get up each day and ask ourselves, is the country moving in a direction not as I would like to see, but as our Constitution requires? Do we want to have an opportunity? Do we want to have an opportunity where our world is a nice peaceful place like Southern California when there's no shootings or robberies or crazy people trying to break in to your home and live in it because they know that you can't be thrown out because it's a civil crime? Do we want that? Or do we seek to have a truly more perfect union where we as a collective society meet to determine where have we fallen down? What should we be doing within the current limitations of our governmental structure? And I would be the first to agree with you that if our governmental structure is not addressing the criticalities of the moment, well, not even the moment, but of modern time, that we should elect people to the Congress and to the White House who will prioritize a constitutional amendment. And failing our politicians' ability to get that done, which is very difficult because the opportunity presents itself that they would limit their own power. So failing that, it is attendant upon each of us as citizens to elect our state legislature such that they would pass a petition to require Congress to call a convention of states. My friends, I want to say just a brief comment about the people who purport themselves to be never-Trumpers. Now, we know liberals will never vote for Donald Trump. It's not in their nature. Trump represents an existential threat to progressivism. And they're right. But it isn't Trump the man that progressives hate. He's just a figurehead, and it's easy to hate on him because, frankly, he allows himself to be a target. But what Trump represents truly is a threat to the Mike Gallaghers of the world, to the Kevin McCarthys of the world, to the Mitt Romneys of the world, to the Liz Cheneys and the Adam Kinzigers, and to the Hakeem Jeffries and the Pelosi's, the Dick Durbin, the Pat Leahy, the Angus King. The notion of a government that is so big and so overblown with its bastardization of the Commerce Clause and other tenets within the Constitution to amass unto itself powers the founders had never envisioned our federal government should have, who would have gone to war had the government we have today been the government that ruled over the colonies. The people of the United States are laughed at by politicians. Politicians who climb the rungs of power and success so that they can engage in corrupt practices with lobbyists, conduct insider trading, become multimillionaires. Nancy Pelosi was a cheap politician in San Francisco. She goes to Congress, and 30 or 40 years later, is worth $200 million. If she had never spent a penny, she would not have that much money. Congress routinely violates its own laws. More importantly, they exempt themselves from many of them. So when politicians talk about the corrupt two-tier system of justice, that Donald Trump is somehow getting a break, I ask you, who's above the law really? When a politician in Congress can illegally trade, buy and sell stocks on a short basis when they know the direction the thing is going. This is like trading places, except Congress is holding the orange report. We need to reduce the administrative state. We need a politician like Donald Trump to do it. And the never-Trumpers who would rather see, quote-unquote, a globalist return are no better than those who would vote for a Democrat. We are facing 20 years or more of an existential threat to the United States. If the rulemaking process that various government agencies are allowed to engage in is not reduced or eliminated, we will find ourselves in a totalitarian regime where politicians hold their hands up and say, I didn't vote for that. I just voted for the person who made the rulemaking process happen. And the people that make the rules, the rulemakers in the various agencies, they're not accountable. Look what's happening with Mayorkas, for example. The man clearly violated the law. He lied to Congress. He's failing to uphold the immigration law. He doesn't get the pass to say that, well, it's Joe Biden's policy. I'm just doing Joe Biden's policy. Every federal officer swears an oath to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States and to faithfully execute the laws thereunto. Mayorkas has failed miserably. And he's not the only one. Ketanji Brown Jackson sits on the Supreme Court, and she says that that the First Amendment is being intrusive at critical points in history, where the need to control disinformation a justice of the Supreme Court of the United States says the First Amendment is getting in the way. There's a lot left to go between now and November. How many of you will be the man in the arena? Who will lay it out on the line for the Constitution of the United States? Who will sit back and take it. Folks, that's going to do it for me here on my last night in Southern California in Newport Beach. I'm going to wish you all a safe and healthy April. Hope your spring elections, for those of you that are having them this month, go the direction that you wish. I hope that conservative heads, never Trumpers, independent-minded libertarians, do you think about what the future of the nation looks like with somebody like Joe Biden or a progressive Democrat versus somebody who wants to reduce the size of government? I will tell you this. The federal government's tax rolls surged after the so-called gift to the billionaires in 2019. It was the highest year of taxes ever collected under a president at the time. But the federal government spent and spent and spent. And now Joe Biden's nearly $8 trillion budget. He doesn't have the money. We don't have the money. It's a giveaway. Will you be the man in the middle? Or will you be the man in the arena? America needs her heroes. This is an opportunity for the next greatest generation to take a stand, to put that line in the sand, and to be as Gandalf and say, thou shalt not cross. Folks, have a good evening. This is the More Perfect Union. I'm signing off from beautiful Southern California. Take care. We'll see you the next time.